Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing. And my guest today, I'm delighted to have him for a one-on-one conversation, finally, is Dennis Dayman. I will say currently Chief Privacy Officer at Maripost, among many other things, but a gentleman with a ton of experience in many domains, including email. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. It's fun to get back out there a little bit more, since the pandemic lockdown and doing it. It's a different way, but we're not physically having to fly anywhere for these things.
Do you miss it, flying?
I do, actually. In fact, I'm flying on Thursday, so I'm actually pretty happy about it. My Jennifer, my wife, and I, we did a couple of trips here and there. As you know, my sons are in university and they play collegiate tennis, so we got a chance to fly out to Florida to go watch them play in the beginning of the summer, and then Jennifer and I took off, went to Nashville just to kind of get away and go hear some music. And then we did our typical, trip to Turks and Caicos about 2 weeks ago, and I jump on a plane and go international here in about 2 days. So,
wow, there you go. Well, it is something to start to get back out. Like
it's a little weird though, with what's happening with the new outbreaks and whatnot.
Yeah.
And as somebody, as you know, I do a lot of work here in the city, on the emergency management side of things as a volunteer. And yeah, you kind of wonder like what I'm about to get into here, jumping on a plane, going somewhere a little bit further than I have been, in a while.
Yeah. So. And you're in Texas, if I recall, right?
Yep, just outside of Dallas. Yep.
Yeah, so Texas, not without its particular challenges at this point in time.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting month or two. What's happening down in Austin?
yeah. Well, Austin slash DC. If nothing else, we've got 50 years worth of civics lessons for school kids that are not ancient historical figures. Like, no, last week.
Yeah.
This is what a quorum is, kids. Last week, right? A bunch of people got on an airplane, and if there's not enough numbers, the rules say it doesn't count. Really? Yeah, really.
Really. I'm watching this through my son's eyes because the timing is kind of perfect with them being juniors in college and now getting their first introduction to adulthood, and then sort of that idea of like what else is going on beyond what mom and dad will let me see. It's interesting to have this conversation with them, to kind of, especially when they've got other adults that they're talking to that their age, or professors and their coaches and whatnot, who have completely different mindsets and political thoughts. And the boys come home and go, "Oh, you're never going to believe what this person said." And I'm like, "Well, all right, let's have this conversation."
And you're juniors in college, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So did they continue school during the pandemic year? Not that it's been just a year.
Actually, in March of last year, they were in Florida at a tournament. Okay. And they got sent home about halfway through. Okay. We were told, "Hey, kids are going back to the college for safety purposes, and they're going to be on campus." And of course, they arrive on campus, and they went, "Never mind, we're going to send them home for a week, and we'll let you know." 6-8 weeks later, they're still here.
Yeah.
And finally, we're like, "Hey, listen, we're paying on room and board, and we'd like to figure out what you're doing." And they finally just said, "Come get your stuff. We're going to continue to finish off the year remotely." And so they came home and finished off the rest of the spring semester. They did some summer stuff here, and then fall went into a hybrid, which basically ended up being teachers' prerogative. Yeah. And basically teachers went, "Oh, well, so I don't really have to go to the university, so let's just do remote." And so you'd find them sitting in their beds, laying down with their laptops at 8 o'clock in the morning, sleeping with the screen in front of them.
Yeah, my younger son last year would have been his senior year. He's at a small liberal arts college in Washington, and the spring experience, right, the March to the end, was so jarringly different.
Yeah,
we talked it through, and he's like, "I don't want to spend a year on Zoom." We said, we agree. Yeah. So he actually did a gap year. 2 weeks he'll be back at school. He did a gap year, and I think it turned out being a fantastic experience for him. He landed a great gig. He learned to work. He bought a beater pickup and blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, right?
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
Well, it's a nice break for them. I mean, I wish I thought about doing that when I was in college. Like I ran through it as fast as I could, and and it was just too much at times. I mean, towards especially that junior year, at least for me, was kind of like one of those ones like you were taking more. For me, there was a lot more math involved, like statistics. Like, who loves statistics? I didn't. I could have used that little brain break, and we did talk about it with them. But they ended up going back,
Yeah.
and actually living on campus or living in a new condo there with some other folks. And
Okay, cool.
but it's kind of fun for them, I think now, especially with us empty nesters. My wife went back to work last year after 20 years because her full time job, what she wanted, right? She
Yeah.
wanted to be a stay at home mom, and so she's gone back to now, of all things, working as a librarian at a local elementary school. So it's keeping her busy. We see
Yeah.
them less and less because again they have their own lives. We don't force them home
Yeah.
or anything like that, but
Yeah.
it gives them that opportunity to spread their wings until they go, oh, hey, I'm going to come home for the weekend and here's some dirty laundry. Need some money. Can you take us food shopping?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's going to be a marker for kids, no matter what what the path was for them. I feel especially for the ones who either senior year of high school or freshman year of college was the pandemic
Yeah.
like bucket. It's like, no, you need to be
Yeah.
with your tribe at that stage.
Yeah. You
It's,
either missed your prom or you
yeah,
didn't get the big kickoff for, for the end of your senior year and,
yeah,
or vice versa. I watched a lot of their friends go, well, their junior, then senior friends go through that, which is kind of like, oh, I hate that you're missing those sort of moments,
yeah, yeah,
like the
yeah.
end of senior parties or the tennis team for the high school did a big party. They couldn't do
Yeah, and
it.
even dumb though it sounds, like graduation ceremonies and those kind of
Oh yeah.
markers, which we all poo-pooed at the time, but we actually probably still remember. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Now, you law enforcement originally into email?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love to blame my father for this one. I grew up in a Bell family. I was a Bell brat, as they say. So all of our relatives worked for AT&T or
Oh,
SBC
wow.
back then.
Wow.
And I went to school for law enforcement. I had planned and did my bachelor's and graduated. I planned on going back and doing my master's and or PhD in criminology and joining long term into the federal agency of some choice of mine, and that'd be it. But again, growing up in a telecommunications family, you also get pulled into the technology side of things. So
Yeah.
I was the one kid on the street that had, if you remember, the old Packard Bell computers with the case that would slide off to be able to get into it. It wasn't the desktop stand up.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
And so I was the one kid that would stand at the CompUSA line at 2 o'clock in the morning. Of course, my father would do it with me, so I get the latest modems. But I also had the ability to have like 4 and 5 phone lines in my room because, again, working in a telecommunications family, you get all these benefits. So
Oh,
I ran actually a couple of bulletin board systems for a number of years,
oh, how
and
cool.
that was sort of my entree into news groups, Usenet.
Yep.
A lot of the folks that even we still see today in the industry came from that area, and so we were dealing with spam within news groups back then, and a lot of us were those anti-spam people that were trying to prevent it. So I was self-taught geek basically,
Yeah.
and as I came home from bachelor's degree, father said, "Hey, come home and I'll get you a summer job," and he did, and I'll age both of us probably here, but my job at AT&T was to migrate them from Token Ring to Ethernet
Woo!
and OS2 warp to Windows,
Oh,
and then
baby. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, real hot stuff. Um, but dad calls me. I'm getting ready to go back. I'm getting ready to go back to school. Dad calls and goes, "Hey, there's this thing called the internet. I think you're messing with this thing at home all the time because I hear it beeping and beep and whatnot." And he's like, "But they're looking for somebody to come, over to the division to understand and to help,
Yeah.
police, if you will. And they need somebody who understands law, but they understand technology." So
Nice.
I was like, all right, I'll take a look at this, and instead of going back to working as a deputy or something, making $37,000 a year, I get this job at AT&T, 60-person division, basically making I think 50 some odd $1,000 a year, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like I get to work inside, and I'm getting a lot of good money, and I get to play with technology,
Yeah.
and I never went back
Never
to the
went
law
back.
enforcement full
Never.
time, but.
And
Yeah.
well, and yet now I betray myself for having made sure I boned up even more in your LinkedIn bio. Now you are involved, but more at a federal level with Department of Homeland Security, correct? A policy level.
Yeah, yeah. It was an appointed position from Obama's administration, actually. So I advised DHS Secretary, Chief Privacy Officer, any of those folks that are higher up there on privacy and security. What a lot of agencies do, and you've seen this several times, and mostly people see it from the White House perspective, the advisor to the president, right? All these groups and organizations have these groups of people. Ours is called the DIPIAC, the Data Privacy Integrity Advisory Committee, and our job is to look at technologies and, look at their policies and procedures, and as experts, give them that feedback or those sorts of things. One of the things that you're probably more familiar with if you travel, for those that are listening, if you travel international, sometimes now you walk up to your gate now, and instead of you giving them either your passport or your ticket, now you walk up and there's a tablet, and you look at it and it turns green and it approves you, and they just say go on to the plane.
Right.
Those are the sorts of technologies that we would take a look at and go, okay. And this is kind of the top level example. It's like, yeah, your passport comes from the Department of State, but yet the stuff that the DHS or what DHS does is a completely separate thing, and the data uses are different. And how do you transpose those, and how long do you hold on to the pictures, and where do you get it from? And so we advise them, and we even test those technologies for them as they need. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay. And then in terms of email, since at some point we'll talk about email just a little bit.
Email, isn't that dead?
Right, not at all. Return Path, Eloqua, Maripost now, like multiple email companies over your career, yes?
So I started at AT&T. I did about 5-6 years there running policy and procedure. So, I was that compliance person. And I spent 2.5 years with the folks at MAPS, or Mail Abuse Prevention Systems, working on the first email blacklist. And Paul Bixie and a lot of the folks that are still in the industry today, we all worked together there for a number of years. That was 2001 when the market had that downturn. So Paul shut down portions of the business. We left. I stupidly went to work back for a Fortune 100 company, even though I enjoyed my time at a startup, and ended up at Verizon for 2 years doing the same work that I was at AT&T. That's when Frank Adante and Tim McQuillan of StrongMail were putting together the company. Tim had left Austin and gone to San Francisco, and they ended up finding me, if you will, within this ecosystem. Because at the ISP level, what we were also doing is we were working with folks at the then brand new ESP level, right? ESPs were just really coming big, and we were saying, don't send spam, quality over quantity, all those things. And from those little groups that we were all a part of, whether it was the Email Sender Provider Coalition, the ESPC back then, they would have us come speak at their events as the, postmasters and things like that. Well, Tim and them said, hey, why don't you come on over here and bring all that knowledge and help us build, this platform called StrongMail. And, we'd love for our customers to hear about it, have you build the technologies for us. And sure, why not? So I left left Verizon and went to do that. Spent 6 years loving every moment of that time there.
Nice.
Wasn't planning on leaving. And then Joe Payne from Eloqua was asked to come in and basically form a new team to do something with where Eloqua was at the time. So they started reaching out to tons of people, created a brand new executive, committee, brought me in to run privacy and security for that. And I was a part of that fun drive in defining what marketing automation was, something completely brand new to us. And it was probably the best job I had ever had, actually, up until that time. And again, really enjoyed that sort of time, taking the company through its IPO. And then, as you know, the acquisition to Oracle. And then, you go vest in peace, with Oracle or whoever it is for a while, and then kind of go, I want to go back to the startup life. And
why do we do that?
Like, it's just easier. But the interesting thing about Return Path was I had known George Bilbrey and Tom Bartel and Matt Blumberg from, now 20 years plus now, but and had been an advisor to their company because I was doing some advisement and startup investments, over the last couple of years. Yeah. And Tom had left to go start a company. And so Matt said, why don't you come and take his position, run compliance? And I said, yeah, let's do that. And so, 5 years later, we sold the company in 2019. I, like everyone else, took some time off, and then, COVID hit and went, I'll just consult and hang around. And I had been helping Ross for a while on and off with his business, just advising when he needed it. And, as you know, he acquired Nito, which is the e-commerce platform now from Maripost, and had asked me to take a look at some stuff. And at the end of last year says, are you ever going to make it official and come work here? Because he'd asked me in the past, but I was happy with what I was doing at Eloqua. I was happy with doing what I was doing at Return Path. Yeah. And the timing was perfect for it. So I came on board. Yeah.
And this Ross equal Maripost for those who aren't doing inside baseball. And my word, are you right in the eye of the storm with your expertise on privacy and security? Like this,
It goes everywhere. I'm touching a little bit of everything.
yeah,
I'm helping, John and the team sometimes on deliverability and sort of email standard issues. The Apple thing, like today's, webinar is one of
yeah,
those good examples. It's like I'm the go-between on some of that because I'm sitting in the middle of those discussions or listening to you guys on that. And then the same thing happens on some of the other product lines or some of the adjustments that might need to be made in terms of how we're going to be doing email, new standards, that sort of stuff.
yeah,
So yeah, it's kind of fun to bring some of that, 25 years of knowledge into
yeah.
this to make things even better and to figure out how we can, build a bit bigger and better product over time. But and then I'm done with the privacy and security stuff. All that falls onto me, everything that's
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that
which is it.
perspective. And then whatever else, they go, hey, we're looking at acquiring this company or, doing this, come help look at the M&A process since I've done that before. So
Oh wow, I have to say your dad made a pretty prescient call, right?
yeah, yeah,
Technology, policy, law, and as
yeah,
you said, 25 years later, yeah,
yeah.
you're still right in the middle of
Uh,
those things. I'm more than a bit of a student of history, and it intrigues the heck out of me that the ragged, rough edge of the digital frontier is so personal. That's a bit unexpected. I mean, yes, we've had all sorts of massive transformations. We could talk all day about that,
well,
but the place where we're now going, hang on a second, need some rules, barbed wires, boundary,
yeah.
and stuff like that is a very personal, not a very macro thing. It's like, wait a minute, I don't necessarily want them knowing about this, or I want to be
Mhm.
able to define it
Yeah.
and control it. Are you surprised by the level of debate, national level debate?
Not so much anymore. I mean, I kind of giggle about sort of like how I, grew up in the digital age in terms of like how I would protect myself. Again, I knew what was happening. And so like many others, we all bought our own email domains and said, all right, I'm going to create all these different email addresses. And
Yeah,
so I've got tons of tagged email addresses. In fact, I complained about it today where I have one that was from 6, 7 years ago. This is on Twitter if anybody cares, but and all of a sudden it's getting spam now. But most individuals, our neighbors or non-technical folks really hadn't really cared about this because
didn't
the
care. Yeah,
technology was the technology. They just look at it, it does what it's supposed to do.
yeah.
And in one of the keynotes that I'd been doing over the last year and a half, I kind of talk about the changing landscape of privacy. And part of the example that I had, discussed in that year or 2 years ago was, the economy has been so heavily reliant on the data-driven aspect of it, right? The amount of jobs, the amount of revenue that companies make, and what happens is it's all digital now. And again, people haven't really kind of cared about it. It
Right.
wasn't until the Cambridge Analytica issues happened.
Yep.
I can't wake up anymore without actually turning on the TV or opening up a newspaper for those that might still read those things, and it just screams data breach every
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah. Every day.
So now what we're seeing is people that are now hyper aware of their data being misused. Now this new thing with Apple and child porn has got everybody, all these people that would have never talked about this at
Hmm.
all are now going, oh, I don't want them looking at my images in the cloud anymore. Like, what's that mean? So I think that it's a natural progression that's happened. It didn't happen overnight, right? I mean, we've all been carrying these digital devices and phones and watches for a very long time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the attorney generals are very tired of the data breaches or data misuses. The regulators are tired of it, and I think consumers are now asking, rightfully so, what are you doing with my data? I'm tired of things happening. I'm tired of having to get a new debit card. I'm tired, and I don't
Yeah.
want to lose it anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah. And in the U.S., I would have to say our approach is patchwork. Maybe we're going to start to get to an actual national level discussion
mhm,
and eventually maybe set of binding decisions because
yeah,
it's a bit scattershot, right? If you
yeah,
live in California, this. If you live in Colorado, that. Da, da,
yeah,
da, 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 da.
yeah,
And just keeping track of that's a daunting lift for the companies that really want to act legitimately.
yeah,
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 and
exactly.
then
Yeah,
you listen to email folks talking like you mentioned the discussion, the webinar that I did with Brian Sisolak this morning. I mean, he was talking about that's okay in the U.S., not in Europe.
yeah,
Like, like
yeah.
we're not
Like,
we're not gaming it,
yeah,
but we're willing
we
to
are
act
willing
for
to.
maximum business benefit, I think.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. I'm watching marketers. I've been watching them for years panic. I mean, even when GDPR started to come out in
Yeah,
'08,
yeah, yeah,
'09,
yeah,
it kind of reminded me, and we were talking about this last week, right? It was like when Can Spam happened, right? We had Trevor Hughes who created the ESPC to go off and to lobby is a high term, but to go off and try to make this law work for all, because marketers were going to lose all their data and everything was just going to go down the toilet. And then yet what we found out was almost 2 years later was, oh yeah, Can Spam was actually kind of good because we went to quality over quantity and did better data. Privacy regulations were supposed to be that, I thought.
yeah,
I thought that they would help, and GDPR did. But then, as you were saying, right, we've just been kind of, lacking here in the U.S. I joke that my wife will give away any part of her PII to get a buy one get one free at Payless, right? It's just how it is with her, right?
yeah,
And that is just the world that we live in here in
yeah,
the U.S. is that we're just open to giving things out,
yeah,
because
yeah,
privacy has never been a fundamental human right. And you stated it very well. It's a patchwork. It's HIPAA and the Cable Act and the
yeah,
Telecommunications Act. And whereas in the EU, right, even with GDPR now, the UK is the example. They had laws in the books in 73, 74, and 75. So you grew up with that idea a bit offline, right, before online happened, that your data was yours and you had to get permission. So it's definitely way different. And
yeah.
will we see something happen? We have to. I mean, I can't track 50 states worth of regulations. And like you said as well, companies here, customers here, what's supposed to happen? I mean, how many more platforms do I need to buy for my website to
Right.
decide what cookies to drop and what not to drop?
Right, right. And I was doing the coffee wake up newsfeed thing this morning, and I was struck by how many accept cookie pop-ups were now
Oh, yeah.
part of the experience. Like noticeably more than X months ago, even. Like
Yeah. Well,
every
it's gotten as
screen of
bad.
interest was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
why? Because that button's bigger and it's more blue than the other one. And I just want to read the dang article for 10 seconds.
It's gotten as bad. Like I remember as GDPR happened, and I remember like some of my earlier trips to Europe, and you walk into the hotel and you unpack your bag, take the laptop out, open it up, connect to the Wi-Fi, and it was like literally there was like 15 choices just to get on the Wi-Fi
Just to get
because
on
of all the
Wi-Fi.
cookies, because
Yeah,
they weren't even sure
yeah,
how to figure out what to ask you or what not to ask you. And it was interesting because even then, the UK ICO, or Information Commissioner's Office, went through a thing where they were like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna turn off cookies, right? And unless people opt in, the default's off is off." And they lost visibility of 95%. Like literally, they talked about this openly. They couldn't, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, per the regulation, we don't have to swing the pendulum that much. Let's go back the other way, And they turned
yeah,
some cookies back on again.
yeah. When the announcement about Apple's email privacy thing
Mm-hmm.
hit after their developer conference, June, I had to do it. I went straight to apple.com to see what kind of analytics and tracking and cookies were involved. And guess what? It's not zero. It's
Yeah,
not freaking
exactly.
zero. It's like, okay, so why is it not okay here and perfectly fine here?
Yeah, all that
Yeah.
third party stuff too. It was all third
Oh,
party. It wasn't
third
even
party
theirs.
stuff too. Yeah. Like,
Yeah,
okay, explain that one to me because you see talking out of both sides of your mouth a little bit, guys.
yeah. I
Yeah.
just don't understand it. Well, and
Well,
like we talked about, and like we talked about last week a little bit, right? It's great that they're going down this route to some extent, but even their own web browser, Safari, really doesn't go as far as it probably could
good.
from that cookie
Agreed.
perspective, right?
Yeah, agreed.
And that's why,
Agreed.
like for me, I mean, like I use Brave now.
Me
I
too.
mean,
Me too.
I used to use the Chrome, and then with all the stuff that was going on, I was like, okay, I'll go to Brave now, give that a whirl for a bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, what are you going to do about Safari moving next?
Yeah.
Apple, are you gonna turn on Do Not Track as a full time? Are you going to start blocking more than just your other people's cookies? It just yeah.
Well, okay. So here's a pointed question for a good reason. How often do you run something in private tabs deliberately?
Pretty regularly, actually, especially if I'm doing searches. Like I just had a friend of mine ask me to look up something about this person was in Canada, and they were like, "Can you look up this medication for me?" I'm like, "Sure. Let me turn on private tabs just for a second because I don't want
I
it to
don't
be
want to be chased
advertised."
by that. Yeah.
I know, I know better, and then I don't need that in my history. Even though Brave is I go back and forth between using the Google search engine and then
Yeah.
using DuckDuckGo, but
DuckDuckGo. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm like, I don't need that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Or I don't need the distraction of all of a sudden every other thing in my news feed is related to to X, to whatever it is. And yeah, and here it is, the boundary. My wife's on the opposite end from what you said about yours. She'll trade PII for convenience, which is very American, and mine is like we'll trade nothing, and we'll deliberately log out of everything. It's almost hard for me to be the tech support guy. I'm like, would you please leave that tab open, because it's going to take another 5 minutes to log back. And she said, I don't like it. Okie dokie, right?
No, my wife does the same thing too. I converted her like 2 or 3 years ago with the LastPass just because I was tired of all the data breaches that were happening, or the passwords, because she was, it was a dog's name with the cat's name and this and that. And it's like, I need to put you on this. And then she goes and closes it. And then when she opens it, she's like, oh, it's asking me to log back into LastPass to factor in before I can even get to my passwords. I'm like, leave it open. Leave it in the background.
Yeah. And then the LastPass of the world, we've got okay, so wait a minute. It's like, who watches the watcher? Who do you trust? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Okay, LastPass, all my passwords in the cloud. That's great. Wait, is that great? I'm not sure. Is that great or not?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And the overarching thing there, which I really was curious to ask you about, if you do this or some of this for a living, or you've been at it for a while, we cope, we keep up, we are aware of things like Brave. The person, the household that doesn't have a pet geek, it's got to be a bugger to navigate the world now.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is.
It's mind-numbingly detailed and complex, and like everyone's a corporation of one, whether they realize it or not. Like just the list of passwords alone. Oh
yeah. No, I tell Jennifer not to tell anybody anymore that I'm in computers and that I'm just basically a digital janitor, and I no longer have stacks of Windows 3.11 disks anymore, so I can't reload their computers anymore. So I just for a while there.
Did you used to get that? Cocktail parties were tech support jobs?
Oh yeah, no, I still do. I mean, the families who I absolutely love, these families that went to, or their kids went to school with our kids, I still get calls from them. They're like, hey, can you come and reconstitute this hard drive that I haven't turned on in 10 years? It's got some pictures from 20 years ago. I'm going, yeah, I don't even know if I even have a SATA or that type of plug anymore.
One of our neighbors hired one of my sons to help them with some tech stuff, and I thought, that's kind of interesting. They kind of knew not to ask me,
right?
But they figured there was probably somewhere in the DNA or the environment, and not even the technical stuff is not their interest. But they're like, this plugs into this, and you do that. And they're like, right? They just absorb it. Although I don't find millennials as tech savvy as they think they are.
No, my boys are not. They still call me quite a bit, even though they've got all the latest and greatest sort of gadgets, but they still have to call me when something's happened, or the university has installed some new software they got to use. I'm like, okay,
Yeah. I mean, those of I hate to do the gray hair thing, but those of us old enough to have sort of worked with the crude early stuff, it's kind of like are being in a conversation about cars and engines, right? It's like, if you had to get under the hood a little bit when you could, you got at least some idea what to try or what parts affect what other parts. Not that I'm a mechanic by any stretch.
No, it's interesting. So the boys this summer changed. So last year when they were here, they were working at the local golf course and making great money. They had tips and whatnot because they figured the system out. Speaking of kids, like they figured out how to work with people. They found the local insurance agent that made a lot of money. When he would pull up every single day, they were quick to get him a golf cart and have it waiting because he was dropping $20, $30 tips every day, right? So they figured out how to work with people, number one. But then this summer, what they've learned is interesting. So Andrew's working at the library and he's learning a lot of good people skills and those sorts of things. And watching him change his mind or how his mind expands is great. But Matthew ended up getting a position at the maintenance division. And, at first, it was he's putting together picnic tables and doing this and that. Nowadays, several weeks, 2 months, maybe 3 months into the summer now, he has gotten so good with tools that something was broken. He came by a week ago, something was broken here. He's like, oh, I'll take care of that. I'm going, wait, what?
Nice.
Wait, but that's great. So I don't have to do this anymore. Like you'll like all of a sudden his mind has been turned on to the fact that I can do
Yeah.
these sorts of
Yeah.
things. And I'm like,
Yeah.
both of these skills that you guys are seeing right now are what's going to come in handy. And I don't think a lot of kids at your age get that opportunity to be ready to enter the workforce in the next couple of years. So, good on you, Matthew, for learning how to fix things, because when you get to be my age and you wonder why I'm fixing things around here, because I know how to do it because I taught myself, right? Yeah. That's lost on most of these kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's those of us in the digital space, it's so partially our fault, right? Mm-hmm. Because these are so freaking complicated and locked down and convoluted that even if you are an expert, it's like, oh man, I can barely, I can't get under the hood at all. And kids with less opportunity or created necessity to work with their hands to understand what a socket sets for and stuff like that. I don't think we're doing them any favors at all.
No, like, well, it's all a lost art. I mean, for you and I, at least, going through school, we had to take home economics. There was still a shop class of sorts. I was a band geek, so there was still some fine arts involved.
What'd you play?
I was a percussionist.
Trumpet.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
No, I elementary school, middle school, high school. I
was a band
played
geek.
for a very long time.
That was my tribe almost all the way through.
It's what kept me out of trouble most of the time.
Yes.
But for kids, I mean, you look at, like, I use this as an example today as well. Like, I sometimes will go teach at the 4A's stuff, right? All to teach the parents about technology and security and privacy, and hey kids, make sure you don't put out your PII or talk to strangers, that kind of stuff. The stuff that they were teaching us, the life teaching skills, right? The life event skills, they're not doing that anymore. No. And one of those is computers and technology. Like, most high schools, or depending on where you're at, you either still use a lab, or if you're, in a nice area, they might give you a tablet or a laptop to use. But outside of that, that's all you're using it for. They don't teach them any of those skills about being online. And I'm interested actually now, with us still now being remote because of COVID, how is that affecting those that graduated in the last year or two that went into the workforce if they were lucky enough to get a job? Like, how does that change your mindset a little bit? Like, do you understand how technology works, video conferencing, all that stuff? Because I don't know, again, it's not being taught as much as it used to be life-wise. And that's part of it. I think that we should be teaching these, younger folks is, hey, you're about to go in the real world. This is how you're going to end up, interacting with the majority of it for quite some time, potentially.
Yeah. And not leaving out the other thing that you mentioned about Andrew, like the people skills stuff.
Yeah,
it's taken a bit of a beating in the last year.
Exactly.
Yeah, because so much is so much is remote and remoted and kind of mediated and phoned in and and I don't discount the skills that the digital natives have that I don't like. They know the protocol. Like, Dad, you called me without texting me first. I'm like, oh, that's the new rule? Like, I don't care.
It's funny you said it, because that's how I primarily will communicate with them, because they're busy and I don't want to bother them. I'm trying, but we actually, they don't even really text that often. They don't really respond back. It's actually, believe it or not, it's Snapchat for us.
Interesting.
When pre-pandemic, but even now, as a lot of us were on the roads, that's how they knew what I was doing throughout my day. I would take photos of the events that we were at, or
Snapchat,
and they would see those or the videos. And the same thing happens with them now, even more today. It's almost like the promotions box at Gmail. It's waiting for them. It's not beeping at them. It's sitting in the Snapchat app. And they've got all their friends who have done it, and they can, when they're ready to, they can go look at those timelines and those videos or those pictures, and then respond whenever they want.
When they want.
So there's no pressure, and I kind of like that myself now. It's been kind of enjoyable for me as well to talk with them. But we get a visual of that.
Yeah. Well, we've got a long-running family, everyone on an iPhone in our case. So we've got a long-running family message thread.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't want to know how many pictures and videos stacked up on multiple devices.
No, we do the same thing too. It's why my wife's phone is always running out of space, because all the pictures and stuff are in that local database.
Yeah. and all of this was barely sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
When we were starting working with this stuff. I mean, if you did BBS, the notion of uploading a picture over 1200, probably 1200 baud,
Yeah.
I don't think so. You got to sit there and watch it render line by line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you had like a bad day or the weather wasn't really good, and I mean, like I remember when we were able to start bonding phone lines together, and then there was ISDN, and you would
Yep.
get a bonded pair, and
Yep.
it
Yep.
was like, wow, I'm doing 128. Well, that's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, back to security and privacy for a second, some of the human behaviors that are problems now were obvious and problems then, even in the infant
Yeah.
days. BBS is you had the flame war, or the guy who wouldn't shut up, or the guy who was trying to sneak ads in there, like same cotton picking.
Same thing. Same thing.
behavior.
It's
Yeah.
just different technology, slower time. It
Yeah.
is. It's still like it's the old tragedy of the commons, right?
Yeah.
We created this for the benefit of, well, originally it was governments and universities and whatnot to be able to trade information, and it was
Yep.
opened up to cut a little bit more and a little bit more, and then obviously that one person comes in and ruins it for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
like I remember years of like being in one news group and going, okay, let's go start another one just over here, and we're going to leave these guys over here because this is getting kind of crazy. And then this one, would start off really well, and then
We'd have
it'd get ruined.
lifespan,
Yeah.
lifespan arc. Yeah. Many dissertations yet to be written. So let's talk more current time frame in email. I mean, you're involved at Maripost. What are the key privacy and security issues for customers of a company like Maripost? What are the things they're grappling with?
I think for us is to be honest, is making sure that our clients understand what their obligations are, and us not ignoring
Interesting.
or looking the other way, right? I find that we all should be a data steward, right? Whether it's our business or again, and I say our business, but our data. So like, as an example, like yesterday, our privacy council within Maripost met, and that, includes like the VP of sales, the VP of marketing, all these higher up people and whatnot, because it shouldn't ever just be me running this thing, but everyone should have a piece of the pie, right?
Yeah.
Because they're also collecting data and they're seeing things that I just can't see day in and day out, especially, with what they're doing. But that same thing I think exists within clients, is that if we know a client has done something, has brought in a list or has done something wrong, and it's like, all right, well, let's look at this for a second. Like, where did you get this from? Oh, it's people in the EU. Did you get permission? Did you do this? You can't do that. Not only can you not do that because it's against our AUP for sending out spam and that kind of thing, but by the way, that's illegal, right?
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that you go off and you do that. Because what I'm noticing and what I'm hearing a lot more of, and you've seen this over the years, is these data protection authorities are not just holding the data controllers, as we like to call them, right? Holding them, in responsibility for whatever that they're doing, but they're now going after those that might be also in processing that data or knowing that something is going on. In other words, you can't claim stupidity anymore. You can't look away from it anymore. And I think it's also our job to sort of do that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that like John and the team have to do on the deliverability compliance side of things, is say, hey, saw some complaints, saw whatever, these numbers are out of whack. What are you, like, stop, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Let us help you figure this out, And so, I think that's one of the things that we spend more of our time on. And I think almost every other company out there kind of does that, right? Because we all want to be the creme de la creme of platforms that are out there, and don't want to end up in the spam folder or on Spam House or something to that effect.
Well, it's interesting from another angle as well, that a vendor it ends up with this additional part of the job, this education, and you're not in law enforcement per se, but law awareness, if nothing else, becomes part of the job. And it's bad for the vendor, bad for the company if their customers really misuse and abuse. So there's a business interest in saying no, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah.
But it does get bigger and broader than that, and you do end up with this additional responsibility that says, like, I need to help you do this because you won't be successful, and because I don't want to see you in jail. Those things. Exactly. It's like if you funny joke to make, but if you buy a you buy a circular saw now, you can bet there's a dummy sticker that says, "Don't stick your fingers in this." It's like, because someone must have once.
Yeah, exactly.
So now the company's got to produce the sticker that says, "Don't put your fingers in the blade." Really,
exactly.
It's a bad
I
idea.
know. Yeah, it's a Darwin Award. They're everywhere. Here's your sign.
I'm waiting for the warning sticker on bricks. Hey, don't hit yourself with this.
Yeah, exactly. Don't throw this around.
It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
Exactly.
But with email is a particularly like funny, weird matrix because there's sort of, I send email, ergo I'm an email expert. Almost everyone's got that mental framework problem. Like,
well, that or they make up their own stats. It was like our discussion today, right? It was like open rates. Hey, I'm seeing 40% open rates. I'm like, one, I don't think you're really seeing 40% open rates, but really, wait, open? Like, let's go back for a second. Let's talk about, clicks to conversions to whatever, right? Let's talk about those real metrics, all the stuff that Jennings was talking about today. It's like, that's what's important. I get the fact that you think you're an email expert because you can hit the button like the monkey does, but no, that doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
This is why my wife doesn't drive a Ferrari, okay? Because there's no way that, number one, she could drive a stick shift like that. And why would I? No. No.
Well, it's hard not to get a little irked with, let's say, marketers who run email programs.
Mm-hmm.
When they seriously don't seem to understand even the basic plumbing involved in what they're doing, and then I try on the other side of it go, well, yeah, but it's not like they're not up to here busy doing the things that they do. I think they'd benefit. I think I made that comment in the webinar today. Like, read up a little bit on HTTP. Guess what? Because it actually is part of your life and has been for 20 years. And if you didn't look at that, you're kind of missing a basic groundwork understanding. And I also think, are they going to bother? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, somebody the other day was like, I can't believe we're still dealing with deliverability issues. How is it that this hasn't been talked about for so long? Well, I mean, you've got all these, new people, new kids, whatever, they're coming into this and they have no idea. It's, they just hire them, right? And go, okay, your job is to help us put together whatever, right? And they start learning those hard lessons very early on. Like, oh, more's better, bigger red buttons, like we were talking about earlier. It's like, no.
Yeah.
There's a way of doing it.
And it has, like this, the digital ecosystem has evolved and continues to evolve so fast that really trying to get on top of, no one's an expert in everything. It's just not, it's like, it's not possible. And email in particular seems to suffer a churn problem, professionally speaking. I mean, there's either people who've been at it for a good long stretch and end up back in it, or there and gone, like the perpetual, someone said freshman class or something like that, like stuff to get them to stick around.
Yeah. It's, I think for a lot of folks, either they find it really fun or they just don't find it fun or not sexy at all, right? I mean, for me, it's, I have to tell people that marketing is not easy. I mean, it just isn't. I mean, if it was, then we'd all be retired. It is a very tough mathematical job. I mean, I kind of make it a science sort of thing. It's like you got a lot of things you have to look at, and you have to be a psychologist, and you've got to be an artist, and you've got to hold multiple degrees, multiple hats almost to be able to do this job and be very successul at it.
Absolutely.
And if you're just coming in and going, oh, I can create an email, sure, I can move some things around, and I can use this WYSIWYG basically, right? But I'm hoping that after I hit that, then good. Maybe if one person buys something, I've done my job.
Yeah. No. Well, but and you made the joke early on about about your stats class in college, and now, like every day, all day, some grasp of statistics is absolutely vital. Why? Because the numbers we're grappling with, you're not going to wrestle down any other way.
Yeah, I joke around with people and tell them that, I mean, and this is true, Haas Hassenborg, who was our professor, and I still remember him very vividly, but, oddly enough, every time I drive by a McDonald's now, I look at a McDonald's and the lessons and the way he would teach it was like, okay, how do they know how to be ready for the lunch crowd? Like how many Big Macs to make, how many, quarter pounders to make, et cetera, without wasting food, without then being behind. And it all comes down to statistics and looking at numbers and samples. And, I'm like, oh, you know what? Okay. And you look at that now from a marketing perspective, you have to look at that and kind of go, all right, what kind of inferences can I make other than just an open, right? I mean, there's got to be more to that than just that. And that was the beauty of like marketing automation. that was an eye opener, especially from somebody who had been a staunch anti-spam person for so many years,
Interesting.
was to finally see this thing called the funnel and go, oh, okay, MQLs, SQLs. And then, for us, one of the examples that I always loved giving was like, hey, here comes Matthew and he's given us his email address and he's got a title of CEO. And by the way, he did click on this and there was all these, numbers. Yeah, these ticks, but these, values. So we would say, okay, well, CEO title is very important to us because that's the person we're looking for. So that's got a 50 as the number. And yet maybe his click is worth 10 points. And that whole point system was so mind blowing to me. I was like, wow. And it was interesting that from Eloqua's perspective, I started talking about it as deliverability plus. Like,
nice.
take your take your deliverability to a completely new level by looking at the mathematics of this.
Yeah. And marketing, as you said, it's art, it's science. Like, I think the science side of it has gone like this in the last decade or so. We've got a level and a set of feedback mechanisms that did not exist in the broadcast era. Like, right? You paid your money, Sam Wanamaker. Half my ad budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. And now half your ad budget is wasted, but you probably know at least part of what's wasted, so you can change it and waste it a different way the next time.
Different way. Yeah, exactly. I kind of miss the old days of like Nielsen measurements, just real simple, just one thing you had to keep out. Now you've got all these different things now.
Right, and it's a lot to learn on the job, but that's the only way to learn it too.
It is. Like. Yeah, I've watched everybody that's been in our industry, all of us old fogies and whatnot, but I've watched all of us at some point or another say, hey, let's go to the university of whatever and let's go start a marketing program, or let's go help them put together and you go full-fledged into it, and the university's like, yeah, we love to do this, and then it just falls apart. It never holds for some reason. I've never been able to figure that out. They're more interested, like all the stuff that I'm doing here in Dallas with like DBU and SMU and all these other colleges. It's all about startups. That's all it is. It's all about cool. They're not putting that money into marketing. They actually, like, SMU's got a great marketing professor, and he teaches some of the real high level basics of marketing, I think. But I don't know how far he gets into it. At least I don't know if he gets into this sort of detail. But it never happens.
What do you make of the entrepreneur / startup, rock star fixation? That seems relatively new to me.
It's a little dangerous, I think. I can't tell you how many times I've either invested into a company or mentored a company where they wanted to live that startup founder lifestyle, right? They see all these famous people that have done really well for themselves and they want that. And so their decisions and their companies are now being made based purely on how do I get there quicker, right? Instead of making smart decisions about your business and financing and hiring and how you build. And it's unfortunately, I think all these TV shows and whatnot very much sensationalize it all. I mean, I don't even watch Mark and those guys doing that stuff on TV because I'm like, wow, you're going to give away 50% of your business just because you're going to get $20,000 in his Rolodex. I'm not sure that's the best deal in the world. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But
it just occurred to me. Rough analogy. You're a former band geek. You'll get it. It's like the startup shows are to the actual grind of building a business as America's Got Talent is to the grind of learning an instrument.
Yeah, learning an instrument and actually getting a talent behind it, right?
Everybody wants to be a rock star. Nobody wants to play scales.
Yeah, no, yeah. That's the thing. I don't want to name names, but like there's an individual that went through one of those singing programs, and I mean, he basically had he had chords but if I put some sheet music to sight read, he couldn't do that or even tell me what a major or minor melodic scale was. There's no way.
Yeah. Instrument, little too much instant. And I mean, we're sounding like the guys in the Muppets balcony, which is a little bit dangerous. I mean, but like someone who does the startup and entrepreneur thing more than once, when I see someone ranting on about the path to glory, I'm like, dude, this is a lot more work than a job. And if you're not willing to sign up for that, you're deluded a little bit, and you're going to learn a lesson the hard way, I suspect.
I've seen a couple of young founders in the last couple of years that came straight out of college. I'm going to start a company, going to make it go like gangbusters. And 2 years later, they're like, wow, this is difficult. I may just want to sell this thing and be done with it. I don't want to put the hard work into it. And it is very tough. I have been there. We have lost it. We have, we have won, but I think people always think that when you say startup, that you're going to be leaving there with 6-7 digits on your paycheck at some point. And most of the time you're not. I mean, it's just going to be a loss.
So, this is a 90+% likelihood not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not to say don't give it a try, but
yeah. But take what you learn from that, right, and do something different. I tell people, like, for me, like, I got involved only because of one person, and it was a guy named Mark Kwame, who was at Sequoia Ventures, and he had been involved with like the eBays and the Googles and the Yahoos in the early days of investing. And when he did, and Sequoia Capital did their investment in Strongmail, I remember like literally asking him, like, how is it you have 30 some odd $1 million that you just gave us? Like if we just piss this thing away, like, what does that do for you? And how do you make money? And I remember him very specifically telling me, listen, do not focus on the money. It's never about the money. He goes, the money's good. He goes, money can be good. It does things for you. He goes, but you have to focus on the product, and you got to focus more specifically on the people and build the culture around your company around them. Because if they're not happy, the company's not going to be happy. It's not going to go anywhere. And that's why you see, I think, a lot of successful startups that have put people first. It's why Google and those folks have invested heavily in, dry cleaning services and food service, all those things to make your life easier so that you'll work hard. Yeah. And eventually it will pay off. And he was so right. I mean, we at Eloqua did the same thing to our clientele. We called them Eloquins. Actually, take that back. We actually called ourselves Eloquins internally as a gesture. The customers heard the term and said, well, how do we become a part of that fancy club? And we're like, oh, well, sure. Well, we can bestow upon you the term Eloquent and be a part of this family. And when we ended up doing that, we brought everyone, the customers and the employees, all together, and that worked. Same thing happened at Return Path. Matt made sure that it was family, it was everything comes first before the job does. And that's why everybody was so happy and able to do those sorts of things. And I think that that's a lost idea on some of these kids that are coming out of college to go, I'm going to do a startup and I've got to be this way. No, you don't, right?
I do think that we're getting smarter about those human capital issues that you just touched on.
Yeah.
When you look at company, you mentioned Google for sure. Netflix always comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're as the intellect and creativity output from an employee becomes more and more clearly the thing that's going to make this work, or the relationships, right? You go, like, how do we enable them to do that and not put crap in the way that doesn't enable that,
right?
So that and pick people that, like, this is their sweet spot, their strong spot, great at people skills, put them in a people job, etc. It's like, it's nice that we're getting smarter. I was at Microsoft in the 90s, which was a fascinating ride, but it was very much you got to be there 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Pre this better recognition of human capital, and I never bought it. Like, if you can't get it done in 5.5 days a week, maybe you need to be a little smarter about picking your projects. See ya.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Well, and it's funny because now, like, even this week, I don't know if you didn't see on the news, but now they're again bringing up this whole idea that we need a 4-day week, right? I mean, great. I think a 4-day week's kind of a nice thing. I personally don't think we need it, but I'm also an adult that's been able to figure out after 15 plus years working at home to go, all right, I can work 12, 18 hours a day if I have to, or if I need to work 6 hours, or like today, I got up this morning and got up early, got the wife out of the house. I went and took a jog and did a little bit of email, and I was like, oh, I got to go to the parts store now because I got to get that part for my car. Back here by 10 o'clock to do a bunch of work. And who knows? I mean, I'm adult enough to figure out that I can balance my days out. But there are others that can't figure that out. They can't put the devices down. It's literally, I think, one of the reasons even that Return Path, when we decided to forego vacations, we said, we don't have vacation policy. You take the time that you need. And what ended up happening is people didn't take vacation. We're like, okay, great. So new policy, every 4 years, you have a 60-day paid sabbatical. And we would kick people out and go somewhere. We would spin their passwords on their email so they couldn't touch it and say, go away. And when I did my first sabbatical, I remember the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was like,
twitchy.
where's my corporate email? And I couldn't get into it. And by the, 6, 7, whatever week it was, I was like, I really don't want to go back to work now.
I took a compromise version of that when our team was a little bit bigger. I said, okay, our vacation policy is you have to take at least one contiguous week of vacation in the year, or I will yell at you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, and Netflix has had this problem with the unlimited vacation. Like people people don't take it. Like, and mea culpa, startup guy, it's freaking hard.
It is.
To detach and not check the log files or whatever and solve that one problem. Like, oh, you dork.
Well, the week that we were on vacation, the whole family of us were on vacation. That week, HR goes, "Hey, everybody in Marpost, Monday everybody has off." And I'm going, "Oh, well, that's nice. I'm already on vacation," but they just gave everybody off on a Monday and said, "Enjoy the day because we need you to recharge and be ready for this whole thing." Right?
Nice. There was a lot of that. We should wrap up soon, but there was a lot of. It was interesting watching companies sort of go, "Oh, wow, we have to take care of people a little bit during the pandemic." Like the verbiage around that shifted really fast, and to the credit of a lot of employers, I have to say.
Yeah, when I talked to to Len over at Twilio and Matt Gonzalez over at Remote. Like those guys said that, when the pandemic started, outside of, go home, here's a budget for you to buy office furniture to work at home. They then started adding more money to them and saying, here's some lunch money, or, go off and do this, or, go off and take this day to go do this with your family. And here's some money to go spend on that. Yeah. I've seen some of the companies in the last year also say, hey, we're actually going to give you $1,200 every year or two, whatever it was, to go take a vacation. We're actually going to pay you for your vacation. And I'm going, that's really awesome. But yeah, it was a complete mindset change in the last year on that.
Do you think we'll go move away from that and sort of go back?
It's interesting to see what's happening with all these companies who were saying you can work remote for as long as you want. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, now you need to show back up again. And everybody got really upset about that because they went, well, I've actually figured this out. I know how to work remotely and do it very well. Now we're back to going, oh, never mind. Pandemic's back. Start working remote again. We'll figure this out later. It's going to be interesting to see.
And like Apple has said, no, and I get why they said that. Like I've actually read that research, and they're right. But just from Apple's lens on it, they're going to lose some rock stars, predictably.
Oh yeah, they are. Well, I mean, San Francisco did. Everybody decided, oh, I don't have to live in the city anymore and pay all this money for rent. Why not? So I'm going to move away. I mean. Moving states in most cases, and they're not going to want. It's getting crowded here.
Boom!
It's getting crowded here. It really is.
Yes, it is. Well, even places like Boise, Idaho, boom! Right, just exploding. And I'm up in the corner of Washington. We're seeing it as well. Although I can't claim it's the only place that's cool anymore because we had a heat wave. What's up with that?
I know, right? I know, right?
Wow. Well, shoot, Dennis, I can't wait for us to be live together at an email conference and continue this conversation.
No, we can do it at a bar,
I was never a huge conference guy, but so many wonderful people in the email space that I've had such a great time getting to know. I literally can't wait for the next live conference.
I think those that are either new to this industry, if I leave you with sort of one thought process in this whole thing is, get to know the folks that you're working with and get to know those that are, in the industry. A lot of us, that have been here long enough, this is an extended family of ours. We've seen the weddings and the babies and the deaths and everything else. And when we all get together at these events, it literally is like, it's a family reunion for all of us to get together and sit down and break bread and have a couple of drinks and then go teach and help, others. And just reach out to people. We're all very nice people, right? So for you and I, definitely it's going to be a lot of fun once we can finally get back together.
I've ever worked in. Well, once again, for those of you listening, my guest today has been the wonderful Dennis Dayman at Marpost, CPO right now, and man of many parts. Dennis, thanks so much for the time. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
No, you're welcome. It was great. Thanks for having me be here.
Let me just cut recording. It makes it so much easier.